Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Pesachim, Perek Dalet, Chapter 4, Mishnah Mishnah 5. Okay, another example of different customs practiced in different places. In a place where the custom is to do labor on Tisha B'Av, Eisen, they do so. One may do so. Now, Tisha B'Av is the day that we commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And we should have our focus on that, on mourning over the destruction. And because of that, there were places that had a custom to refrain from doing labor on Tisha B'Av. Didn't work on the Tisha B'Av. Because when you work, you get involved in your work, and you take your mind off mourning over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, there were places where they practiced, had a custom to refrain from work. But some places did work, because there's no halacha, there's no actual law that was instituted to say that you can't do work. So, in a place where the practice is to do work on Tisha B'Av, Eisen, they do it. In a place where the custom is not to do work, Ein Eisen, then it's not done. Now, when we're talking about work here, we're not talking about simple work. Let me just read here from the bottom. Work that can be done in a short time with little effort, such as lighting a candle or tying a knot, may be performed even in these communities, since such work will not distract from the Tisha B'Av mourning. Flicking on a light, right, doesn't take your mind off mourning on Tisha B'Av. Your typical simple types of activity or work, even though these things are considered work for Shabbos, we may not do. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, that's not the issue. The issue is getting involved in some kind of labor, some kind of work that takes your mind off the spirit of the day. Flicking on a light, tying your shoes, doesn't do that. Okay, now, and in any place, meaning in any community, Talmidei Chachamim B'Teilim, Torah scholars don't work. That's because Torah scholars are expected to be more focused or cognizant of the destruction of the Mikdash. They feel the loss greater, and therefore for them, it's appropriate that they should not be distracting themselves from the mourning over the Beis HaMikdash on Tisha B'Av. But this, according to this first opinion of the Mishnah, is reserved for Talmidei Chacham, for Torah scholars. It's expected from Torah scholars that they will be mourning over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash more than regular people. And according to the Tanna Kama, if a regular person says, according to this opinion, if a regular person, not a Talmid Chacham, not a Torah scholar, wants to refrain from work, he shouldn't. Because that's called Maksikura. He's looking haughty. People are going to look at him not working and they say, he thinks he's a Talmid Chacham. He thinks he's a Torah scholar. It's going to come across that he's trying to be more than he is. And therefore, if he is not a Torah scholar, he should do his regular work that he would do any other day. Mishna Gamliel says, a person should always make themselves a Torah scholar. Meaning, regarding Tisha B'Av, you should make yourself a Torah scholar. Even if you're not a Torah scholar, try if you're ready to refrain to stop doing work, you should do so. Because again, then you'll stay more focused on Tisha B'Av. What about the problem that you look haughty? The answer is, people are going to say, you know why he's not working?
Lazy.
Well, let's not be as negative of that. But he doesn't have what to do. He doesn't have any work for today. So therefore, being that it's not automatic that you're refraining from work is going to look haughty. So Mishna Gamliel says, if anybody wants to do it, they should do it. And that is the general practice nowadays, to refrain from doing work on Tisha B'Av, unless, you don't have a choice. Now, the Mishnah is reverting way back to the beginning of this whole discussion. We started off talking about that there are some places that are accustomed not to do work on Erev Pesach, and some places did. And once we got into that, we launched into a bunch of other examples of where some place you have the custom, some place you don't have the custom. The next part of the Mishnah is going back to that whole discussion. The Chachamim say, in Yehuda, in Judea, in the area of Israel known as Judea, they would do work on Erev Pesach until midday. And in the north, they didn't do work at all. Now, what's happening here is that until now we had a question of customs, right? A custom. The custom was the whole discussion to begin with was the whole discussion to begin with, the beginning of the chapter was some places have a custom to do work until midday, and some have a custom not to do work at all. And that's really what's happening here. The point is, though, I mean, the Chachamim are saying in Yehuda it was half a day, it was until the midday, and in the north they didn't work at all. Sounds just like what we discussed before, but the commentaries point out that the difference here is before we called it a custom, and here it's not the Chachamim are not calling it a custom. They're saying it's a halacha, it's the law, it's the halacha, that's the law. You don't, and there was a difference of opinion as to what the halacha is. There is a halacha, you may not do work on Erev Pesach. And the question is, what that law that was established, how was it established? Was it established only until midday of Pesach? Meaning from midday on in Pesach, that's when that law was established. That's what was the practice in Yehuda, in Judea, because they held that was the halacha, that until midday you can work, and after midday you can't. And by Galil in the north, they held that this law that was instituted not to do work at all on Erev Pesach was the whole day. So it's not a question of custom. In the beginning of the chapter, the discussion was someplace have a custom this way, someplace have a custom that way. Here, according to this point in the Mishnah now, it's not a question of custom. It's a question of halacha. It's a question of what was the law that was instituted. In Yehuda and Judea, they held that the law was instituted not to do work from midday on of Erev Pesach. And in the Galil, in the north, they were of the opinion that the halacha instituted not to do work on Erev Pesach applied the whole day. Now, if you're in Galil and you're not doing work a whole day Erev Pesach, when does that day start? When does that prohibition start? We know that the day starts from the night before. Does it start from the night before or only by day? Halayla, the Mishnah concludes, and regarding the night, meaning the night of the 14th, according to the Galil, that they don't work a whole day. Beis Shammai Oisrin, Beis Shammai forbidden at night. Beis Hillel Matirin, Beis Hillel permit Adonai Tzachama until sunrise. Beis Shammai say that this law that was instituted not to do work on Erev Pesach it was instituted to be like a holiday. When the holidays begin? The night before. And therefore, Beis Shammai said this prohibition of not doing work that they practice in the Galil started at night. Beis Hillel said no. This law that was instituted was not instituted like a holiday. It was instituted similar to a fast day. Fast days don't start at night. Fast days start at day. And this, according to Beis Hillel, this was how the law was instituted. It was instituted similar to a fast day. At night, it doesn't apply, and by day, it does apply. Now, it's interesting to note is that it says Beis Hillel permit until sunrise, meaning until sunrise, you can do work. After sunrise, you can't. Now, we know that when it comes to a fast, or in general, when we talk about halachas of the day, we say that the day starts before sunrise. The day starts with Amud HaShachar, with daybreak. And that's when a fast day starts. So Beis Hillel are comparing it to a fast day, but not exactly, because fasts start by daybreak, by Amud HaShachar. But Beis Hillel is saying here, this prohibition of work starts from sunrise. And they explain around the bottom that according to Beis Hillel, the prohibition starts only from sunrise because that's the earliest time a laborer generally leaves his home to go to work. Sunrise was the time to go to work. Daybreak was not that typical. And therefore, there was the prohibition of doing work on the day of Erev Pesach starts from sunrise, not from daybreak. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
They couldn't see what they were doing.